I helped an alien warrior woman escape the arena. I was speechless when I found out who she was. Lucas was used to traveling through rough places. As a mercenary, he had seen his fair share of dangerous cities, distant planets, and strange people. But nothing could have prepared him for the alien arena on Varney's Prime. The planet was a place where the rich and powerful of the galaxy came to watch brutal battles between aliens, creatures from distant worlds forced to fight for the entertainment of others. The arena was vast, like a stadium made from cold steel and glass. The stands were packed with excited spectators, some cheering, others betting on who would live or die. It wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a spectacle, a show of strength, and a reminder of the power the elite had over the weak. Lucas had no interest in the bloodshed, but when he was hired by a group of smugglers to deliver a package to a contact on Varney's Prime, he couldn't turn down the money. He had no idea what the package was, and honestly, he didn't care. His focus was always on the job. It wasn't until he arrived at the arena, standing near the high-class balcony, that he realized how different this planet was. He was watching from the sidelines when the next match began. In the center of the arena stood a massive alien woman, her skin a deep green and her hair a wild, tangled mess. She was tall, even taller than most of the other fighters, her body built for strength and endurance. Her eyes were sharp, piercing like blades, and her movements were calculated. The crowd went wild as she squared off against a much larger opponent, an armored beast of a creature with 4 arms and sharp claws. It was clear the crowd favored the beast. Lucas, however, found himself strangely captivated by the alien woman. She didn't fight like the others. Her style was swift, precise, and controlled, like a dancer rather than a brawler. But there was something more, an underlying tension, an anger in her eyes. She wasn't just fighting to survive, she was fighting for something else. The more he watched, the more he felt a strange pull toward her. The fight dragged on, and the woman's opponent gained the upper hand. The beast roared as it swung its claws toward her, narrowly missing her as she ducked and rolled. But there was a single moment, where Lucas saw it. She faltered. Just for a second, her foot slipped and the beast grabbed her by the arm, slamming her to the ground. The crowd screamed in approval. Lucas's hand tightened around the railing. He didn't know why, but he couldn't stand to watch this anymore. She wasn't a fighter for sport, she was a person, a being who deserved better than this. The gladiatorial games were a sick joke, and he realized he couldn't stand idly by. He pushed through the crowd, moving quickly toward the exit of the stands. He didn't have a plan, but he had to do something. He had to help her. Lucas had spent years learning the ins and outs of complex systems, especially security systems. As a mercenary, it was part of the job. He had always been good with electronics, always had a way of finding weak points in the enemy's defenses. It didn't take long for him to find the entrance to the security room behind the arena. He hacked into the system and disabled the force barriers that kept the fighters inside the arena. The moment the barrier dropped, chaos erupted. The alien woman, still on the ground, looked up in confusion. She could sense something had changed, but she didn't know what it was. Her opponent, too, was momentarily distracted. The crowd's roar intensified, but Lucas ignored it. He didn't have time to waste. He ran down the hallway toward the arena, using the chaos as cover. By the time the guards realized what was happening, he was already inside. The moment the alien woman saw him, she jumped to her feet, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. But Lucas didn't stop. He extended his hand to her, hoping she would understand that he wasn't an enemy. Without speaking, she took his hand, and in that instant they were running together. Lucas didn't know what he was doing. He just knew he couldn't let her be captured again. The guards were already on their way, their weapons raised, but Lucas was faster. He led the alien woman through the dark corridors of the arena, avoiding the soldiers as best as he could. When they reached the exit, Lucas took a deep breath and slammed his foot against the door. It burst open and they were free, running into the night under the dim glow of the city's neon lights. They didn't stop, not until they reached a quiet alley far from the arena. The woman collapsed against a wall, breathing heavily. Her eyes were wide, filled with both fear and anger. She was clearly confused, not knowing why a stranger had helped her. But Lucas didn't have the answers. He didn't even know why he had done it. It was just a gut feeling, an instinct he couldn't ignore. For a few moments there was silence between them. Neither of them knew what to say. The woman was the first to speak. "You helped me," she said, her voice low and rough, like she hadn't spoken in days. "Why?" Lucas didn't have a good answer. "I couldn't just watch you die in there," he replied, his voice rough. "That's not right." The woman studied him for a moment, trying to read him. Lucas couldn't blame her. He was just a human mercenary, a stranger to this planet, and yet he had risked everything to free her. Finally she nodded. "I owe you my life." Lucas shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, just get out of here, get to safety." But the woman didn't move. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Finally she spoke again. "I can't. They'll come for me. They'll always come for me." Lucas knew she was right. They couldn't stay there. He had no plan, no safe place to take her. He was just a mercenary, no one important. But something told him that helping her was only the beginning. Something told him that he had just become involved in a fight much bigger than he could have imagined. The alien woman, whose name he would soon learn was Iria, looked at him with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "What will you do now?" she asked. Lucas didn't have an answer. He just stared back at her, the weight of the situation settling over him. He had helped her escape the arena, but that was only the start. What happened next was anyone's guess, but one thing was clear. Lucas had just gotten caught up in a story that was far from over. And this story, he realized, would change both their lives forever. Iria sat against the wall, her eyes scanning the alley as though expecting someone to appear from the shadows at any moment. Lucas stood a few feet away, leaning against a stack of crates, his mind racing. He had acted on impulse when he freed her, but now that they were in the clear for the moment, he felt the weight of the decision he had made. "What now?" he asked, trying to sound calm, but his voice betrayed a sense of uncertainty. They were both in danger. The guards would be looking for them, and there wasn't much time before the whole city would be alerted. Iria's eyes narrowed as she studied him, her gaze fierce, yet filled with something Lucas couldn't quite place, perhaps respect, or maybe caution. "We need to leave this place," she said, her voice steady but with a certain hardness to it. "The longer we stay here, the more likely it is that they'll find us." Lucas nodded. "But where will we go? I'm not familiar with this planet. I didn't even know I was going to end up at an arena when I got here." Iria stood up slowly, her tall, muscular frame moving with an ease that spoke of years of combat training. She was clearly used to physical exertion. She looked at him for a moment as if considering the options before speaking again. "You'll follow me," she said simply. "There's a safe house, a place where the arena's guards won't look for us, but we have to move quickly. They're already looking for me." Without another word, she started walking, her long strides carrying her purposefully forward. Lucas hesitated for only a moment before following her, his footsteps quick to match hers. They moved through the winding alleyways of the city, staying close to the shadows to avoid being seen. Every now and then, Lucas would glance over at Iria, watching her with curiosity. She didn't speak much, but there was an aura around her, something fierce, something that made him feel like he was walking alongside a warrior, not just someone who had been forced into this situation. He couldn't help but admire her. As they continued down the narrow streets, Lucas began to notice how different the city was when you weren't looking from the comfort of the high-class stands in the arena. Here it was dark, the streets were littered with trash, and the people who lived here looked like they were struggling to survive. He could hear the murmurs of whispers from the locals as they passed, some staring at Iria with fear, others with something closer to admiration. They eventually reached a rundown building tucked away at the end of a quiet street. Iria stopped in front of the door and glanced around before slipping inside. Lucas followed, stepping cautiously into the dimly lit space. The inside was surprisingly quiet, with only the faint sound of water dripping from somewhere in the back of the room. Iria led him into a small, windowless room at the back of the building. She went to a table in the corner and started rummaging through some supplies, pulling out a small medkit. Lucas watched her for a moment, unsure of what to do. He didn't know her story, and she hadn't said much about herself since they escaped the arena. But something about her made him want to help. She had risked everything to escape. Why? What was she really fighting for? "Sit down," she said, snapping him out of his thoughts. "You look like you could use some rest." Lucas hadn't realized how tired he was until that moment. He had been running on adrenaline since the moment he freed her. He sat down on a nearby crate, feeling the weight of exhaustion hit him all at once. His mind was still spinning from the events of the past few hours. Iria moved to him, her focus now entirely on the medkit. She began to clean a small cut on her arm, the injury a result of the battle in the arena. Lucas watched her closely. Her strength was evident, but so was the vulnerability hidden beneath her tough exterior. There was a fire in her that wouldn't let her be broken, no matter what she had been through. "I didn't ask your name before," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Who are you?" Lucas blinked in surprise. "Lucas, just Lucas. I'm not important. Just a mercenary, came here on a job, never thought I'd end up in an arena." Iria nodded slowly. "I see, and you decided to help me. Why?" Lucas shrugged. "I don't know, it didn't feel right watching you get dragged into that fight. I guess He stopped himself, unsure of how to explain. "I didn't want to see anyone suffer like that." Iria looked at him for a moment as if weighing his words. "You're strange," she said, her tone soft but laced with something akin to amusement. "Most people wouldn't risk their lives for a stranger." Lucas chuckled quietly, feeling a bit embarrassed. "Guess I'm not most people." For a moment there was a brief pause between them, and then Iria stood up. She gathered the medkit and set it aside before walking over to the small window at the back of the room. She peered through the cracks in the wooden boards, her expression hardening. "They'll come for me soon," she said quietly, her voice serious. "The arena's guards will be searching the city, and it won't be long before they realize I've escaped." Lucas stood up, moving toward her. "Then we'll leave. We'll get off the planet. I can help you." Iria turned to look at him, her eyes intense. "And where will we go, Lucas?" "The Empire controls most of the galaxy. I can't just run and hope to hide. They'll find me. And when they do," she trailed off, and Lucas could see the weight of her words sink in. She wasn't just an escaped prisoner. She was someone who had a bigger target on her back. She was someone important, someone whose very existence threatened the stability of the Empire that controlled this part of the galaxy. That was why the Empire wanted her back so badly. "Listen," Lucas said, trying to sound confident, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. "I'll help you get out of here. I can figure out a way to smuggle you out of the city. I've got connections." Iria didn't respond right away. Instead, she just looked at him as though considering what he had said. Finally, she nodded. "Fine," she said. "But you need to understand something. This isn't just about escaping. It's not just about me. The people in the arena, the ones who fight for their lives, this whole system is broken. I can't just escape and hide. I need to stop it. I need to bring the Empire down." Lucas stared at her, a new sense of understanding dawning on him. She wasn't just a woman fighting for her own survival, she was part of a much larger fight, and somehow he had become a part of it too. "You're going to fight them?" he asked, his voice a little uncertain. "I don't have a choice," she replied simply. "The Empire doesn't let people like me go free. If I want to change anything, I have to fight." Lucas nodded slowly, the gravity of the situation hitting him all at once. He had been caught up in something much bigger than himself, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose. Helping Iria escape wasn't just an act of kindness. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something that could change the course of the galaxy. "I'm with you," he said, more certain than he had ever been. "Let's do it." The next few days were a blur of motion, fear, and uncertainty. Lucas and Iria kept to the shadows, moving quietly through the city streets as they planned their next steps. They had to be careful. The Empire was vast and powerful, with resources far beyond what Lucas had ever encountered. Every alleyway they passed seemed to be filled with eyes, every shadow a potential enemy. The arena guards weren't just hunting Iria, they were hunting anyone who had helped her. That meant Lucas, too. They stayed in a series of hidden safe houses, small, barely furnished rooms tucked away in forgotten parts of the city. Lucas spent his time trying to make sense of the situation. He'd never been in a fight like this before. In the past, his mercenary work had been about simple contracts, gather information, sabotage, escort missions. But this was different. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about stopping something big, something dangerous. And that something was the Empire, the same empire that ruled this entire galaxy. Iria was calm in the midst of it all. She moved with purpose, always thinking ahead, always aware of the risk. Lucas couldn't help but admire her strength, but he could also see the toll it was taking on her. Every day, she seemed more distant, more focused. She had a plan, he was sure of it, but what that plan was, he still had no idea. One evening, as they sat together in the corner of another rundown safe house, Iria spoke to him. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice low but firm. She paused for a moment as if weighing her next words carefully. "You've helped me. I owe you the truth." Lucas watched her carefully. "The truth about what?" Iria stood up, moving toward a small, weathered chest in the corner of the room. She unlocked it, pulling out a set of documents, holographic records, and a small, intricate device that Lucas couldn't immediately identify. She brought them over to the table and laid them out before him. Lucas didn't speak as he looked over the papers, his brow furrowed in confusion. He wasn't sure what any of it meant. The words were in a language he didn't recognize, and the symbols seemed foreign, even to his experienced eyes. But Iria didn't wait for him to ask. She began to explain. "These documents," she said, pointing to the records, "are from my past, from before the arena. Before I became a prisoner." Lucas looked up at her, trying to make sense of it. "Your past? What do you mean?" Iria's eyes darkened as she sat down across from him. "I'm not just an escaped fighter from the arena, Lucas. I was born into the Empire. I am the daughter of the ruling family." Lucas froze. The words took a moment to sink in. Iria, the fierce warrior he had come to respect, was the daughter of the very rulers they were fighting against. She was royalty. Her father, the Emperor, was one of the most powerful figures in the galaxy, a ruler who controlled everything, from the economy to the military. The people in the arena weren't just slaves. They were part of a system, a brutal game designed to keep the Empire in power, to entertain the masses while reminding everyone of who truly controlled their lives. And Iria was the one person who could bring it all down. "I was supposed to inherit the throne," she continued, her voice colder now, harder. "But when I was young, my father betrayed me. He sent me to the arena to fight for sport, to be a tool for his power. He wanted to prove that even his own daughter could be broken. But I never gave him that satisfaction." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. The woman sitting in front of him wasn't just a prisoner. She was a princess, a leader, someone who had been betrayed by the very people she was supposed to trust. Her father had sacrificed her life, her freedom, just to keep the power of the Empire in his hands. "I tried to escape many times," Iria said, her eyes distant, as though reliving those painful memories. "But the arena was a prison in itself. They would have killed me if I had succeeded, so I waited. I bided my time planning until I could get out. And that's where I come in, Lucas asked, his voice low, a mix of awe and disbelief. Yes, Iria answered, her gaze steady. You didn't just help me escape the arena. You helped me start something much bigger, something I've been planning for years. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. He had been caught up in something much deeper than he had ever imagined. But Iria wasn't just a warrior. She was a symbol of resistance. And now she needed his help to bring down the empire. This isn't just about getting out of here, she said, her voice sharp with determination. I didn't survive all those years in the arena just to run away and hide. I'm going to bring the empire down. I'm going to destroy the system that enslaves people like me and like you. Lucas stared at her, unsure of what to say. She was speaking with such conviction, such fire. But he knew the odds were stacked against them. The Empire had an army, resources, and a stranglehold on nearly every planet in the galaxy. Could they really take it down? I don't know how we can do this, Lucas said finally, his voice uncertain. We're just two people. We're outnumbered. Iria leaned forward, her eyes locked onto his. We're not alone, Lucas. There are others. Rebels, people who have been fighting for years. People who want change, but they need a leader. Someone they can follow. That's why I need you. Me? Lucas asked, confused. I'm just a mercenary. I don't know anything about leading a rebellion. You know more than you think, Iria said. You've fought before. You've survived. You know how to think on your feet. You've got skills that I don't have. You can help me organize this rebellion. Together, we can do this. The weight of her words settled on him. Lucas wasn't a soldier in the traditional sense. He had fought battles, yes, but he wasn't a revolutionary. He wasn't a leader. He had always been a lone wolf, looking out for number one. But there was something about Iria's determination, her conviction, that made him want to help. He had already come this far. Maybe he didn't know how to lead, but he could help guide her. Together, they could make a difference. I don't know what the next step is, Lucas said slowly, but I'm with you, whatever it takes. Iria gave him a small, grateful smile. Thank you, Lucas. We have a long road ahead of us. As they continued to talk, the plan began to take shape. They would need allies, people who were already working against the Empire. Iria had contacts, rebels hidden across the galaxy, ready to fight if they had a leader they could trust. They would start small, building up their forces, gathering weapons and resources. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth fighting for ever was. Lucas felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in years: hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Together, they could do something big. Together, they could change the galaxy. And as the night grew darker, Iria and Lucas sat together, planning their next move. The fight had only just begun. The days turned into weeks as Lucas and Iria worked together to form the beginnings of a rebellion. It was harder than either of them had expected. There were so many moving parts: gathering resources, finding allies, and staying one step ahead of the Empire's forces. The guards were still searching the city, and the arena had put out a bounty for information on Iria's whereabouts. It seemed like every time they took one step forward, they were forced to take two steps back. Despite the challenges, they didn't stop. Iria's determination was like a fire, always burning, and Lucas found himself swept up in it. He had always been a loner, someone who worked alone, but there was something about Iria that made him want to fight beside her. She wasn't just a warrior, she was a symbol, and Lucas was beginning to see just how much hope she gave to the people around her. One evening, after a long day of scouting the city for potential allies, they returned to their temporary hideout. Iria looked tired, but there was a fire in her eyes that never seemed to dim. Lucas, on the other hand, was feeling the weight of it all. The rebellion was starting to take a toll on him, but he couldn't let himself falter. He was in this now, and there was no turning back. They sat down in the small, dimly lit room they had claimed as their base for the time being. The walls were bare except for a few maps and notes scattered across a table. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now. Iria glanced over at him, her voice soft but firm. We need to move quickly. The Empire is starting to mobilize their forces. If we don't act soon, we won't have a chance. Lucas looked at her, his face serious. I know, but we're still too small. We don't have the resources to take on the entire Empire. Iria stood up, walking over to the table where the maps were laid out. We don't need to take them on all at once. We'll start small. Disrupt their supply lines, weaken their hold on key locations. We've already made contact with some rebel groups on nearby planets. They'll be ready to join us when the time comes. Lucas was quiet for a moment, considering her plan. He could see the logic behind it, but there was a part of him that still felt uncertain. The Empire wasn't just a government, it was a machine, and machines didn't go down easily. I don't know, he said, rubbing his forehead. We don't even have enough fighters yet, and even if we did, we're up against the full might of the Empire. Iria turned to face him, her expression resolute. That's why we need to strike quickly. Hit them where it hurts before they can react. The longer we wait, the stronger they'll become. She walked back to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Lucas, I need you to trust me. I know this isn't easy, but we're doing the right thing. This isn't just about me. This is about freeing everyone who's been crushed under the Empire's heel. Her words carried weight, and for the first time, Lucas felt a true sense of purpose. He had been a mercenary for so long, fighting for whoever paid him. But this was different. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something bigger than himself. He met her gaze and nodded slowly. All right, let's do it. That night, they worked late into the hours, finalizing their plan. They knew that they couldn't take on the Empire all at once, but they could start by targeting key supply routes and weak points in the Empire's infrastructure. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a way to show the galaxy that the rebellion had begun. The next morning, they gathered a small group of rebels they had recruited from the underground movement. There weren't many of them, maybe a dozen or so, but they were all skilled fighters, each with a personal reason to fight back against the Empire. Some were former soldiers, others ex-slaves who had escaped the arena, and a few were simply people who had had enough. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Iria stood at the front, giving them a quick briefing. We're going to attack a supply depot on the outskirts of the city. It's one of the Empire's key strongholds, and if we can take it down, we'll cut off their supply lines and make it harder for them to keep control. We hit fast, hit hard, and get out before the Empire can retaliate. Lucas was impressed by how calm Iria was. She wasn't just the leader of this rebellion, she was its heart. She had the strength to lead, and the will to do whatever it took to bring the Empire down. The group moved out, making their way through the city to the depot. Lucas stayed close to Iria, keeping an eye on the surroundings as they moved. They had to be careful. There were Imperial patrols in the area, and if they were spotted, the whole mission could go south in an instant. When they reached the depot, they split into smaller teams to cover more ground. Iria led the main assault, taking the front with two of the rebels, while Lucas and the rest of the group flanked the sides. The plan was simple: infiltrate, disable the security systems, and take out the guards. It was risky, but they didn't have much choice. As they moved closer to the depot, Lucas could feel the tension in the air. His heart pounded in his chest. It had been a long time since he'd been in a fight like this, since he'd had to plan an assault against a well-armed enemy. But he wasn't just fighting for money this time. He was fighting for something bigger than himself, something that mattered. Iria signaled for them to move forward, and the team moved in. They were quick, efficient, and deadly. The Empire's guards never saw them coming. Lucas and the rebels silently took down the sentries at the perimeter, while Iria and the others stormed the main building. Inside, the fighting was fierce. The Empire's soldiers were trained, but they weren't prepared for the rebels' speed and determination. Lucas found himself in the middle of the chaos, his gunfire steady as he helped clear the way. The adrenaline kicked in, and for a moment everything felt right. This was what he had been trained for, this was what he had been waiting for. After what felt like hours, they had secured the depot. The Empire's forces had been scattered, and the supply lines were officially cut. It wasn't a massive victory, but it was a victory, and it was the first step toward bringing the Empire down. As the rebels began to gather the supplies, Iria approached Lucas, a small smile on her face. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "This is just the beginning." Lucas nodded, his eyes scanning the area. "Yeah, it's a start. But we've got a long way to go." Iria's smile faded slightly, but there was still determination in her eyes. "I know, but every step we take, every victory we achieve, it's one step closer to bringing the Empire down." For the first time since he had met her, Lucas truly believed that they could do it. They weren't just a group of rebels. They were a movement, and with Iria leading them, they had a chance to change the galaxy. The fight was far from over, but they had proven one thing. They weren't going to stop. Not now, not ever. Weeks passed since their first victory, and with each passing day, Lucas and Iria's small rebellion grew stronger. They continued to move in the shadows, gathering support, making alliances with underground movements on different planets, and executing small but significant attacks against the Empire. Each mission was a victory, no matter how small, and every success added fuel to the fire that was slowly building inside Lucas. He had been a mercenary before, someone who fought for money and for survival, but now he was part of something bigger. Iria had become the heart of the rebellion, a beacon of hope for those who had long suffered under the Empire's oppressive rule. Lucas could see the change in her as well. At first, she had been distant, focused only on the mission. But now there were moments when he could see her smile, when the weight of her past seemed to lift for just a moment. It wasn't easy. The Empire's forces were vast, and every victory they had only seemed to stir up more trouble. They were fighting an empire that had been in power for centuries, and the odds were stacked against them. Yet, despite everything, Lucas felt a strange sense of pride in what they were accomplishing. They were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for freedom. One evening, after another successful mission, Lucas and Iria sat alone in their safe house, the silence between them comfortable. The rebels had scattered to different locations, preparing for their next strike. The night was quiet, but Lucas knew that peace was only temporary. The Empire would retaliate, and when they did, it would be brutal. Iria broke the silence. "We need to do more," she said, her voice steady but serious. "We need to hit them where it hurts." Lucas turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean the heart of the Empire," she replied, her eyes dark with determination. "Their capital. If we can strike there, we'll send a message to the entire galaxy. The Empire's grip will weaken. People will see that we can win." Lucas hesitated. The capital was a fortress. It was the center of everything, the Empire's government, their military command, their power. Attacking it was suicidal, but he knew better than anyone that Iria wasn't someone who would back down once she set her mind to something. "You're serious about this," Lucas said quietly. Iria nodded. "We've done everything else. Now we need to go to the source. If we take the capital, we can destabilize the entire empire." Lucas thought about it for a long moment. The danger was unimaginable, but the thought of finally bringing the empire to its knees, of ending the cruelty that had shaped so many lives, was hard to ignore. He had seen the suffering in the streets, heard the stories of families torn apart by the empire's greed. He had seen Iria's pain, her desire for justice, and he knew that if anyone could lead them to victory, it was her. "All right," Lucas said, his voice firm. "Let's do it." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Iria and Lucas gathered their most trusted allies, the rebels who had proven themselves in the battles they had fought so far. They planned their strategy carefully, knowing that the capital would be heavily guarded. There was no room for error. Iria's plan was simple: infiltrate the capital, strike at its core, and create chaos. They would need to disable the Empire's communication systems, cut off their access to reinforcements, and create confusion within the government. It wasn't a full-scale attack. It was a disruption, a way to tear down the Empire's illusion of invincibility. Lucas spent days familiarizing himself with the city's layout, going over maps and intelligence reports. The capital was a maze of high-tech security systems, guarded by thousands of soldiers. He would need to use all his skills as a mercenary, everything he had learned over the years, to navigate the danger ahead. The night of the mission, they boarded a stolen transport ship, heading straight for the capital. Iria stood at the front, her face set in a mask of determination. Lucas stood beside her, feeling a strange mix of fear and excitement. This was it. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. As the ship neared the capital, Lucas could see the sprawling city below them, massive skyscrapers, glowing with the light of the Empire's control. It was beautiful in its own way, but it was a beauty built on the suffering of millions. The thought of taking it down felt right, but it also felt terrifying. Iria's voice broke through his thoughts. "We need to get in quickly. Once we're on the ground, we'll split into teams. We take out the communications center first. Then we disrupt the security systems. If we can do that, we can make the Empire vulnerable." Lucas nodded. He had heard the plan 100 times by now, but hearing it again made the weight of it all feel real. They were about to challenge the most powerful regime in the galaxy. It was going to be a fight unlike any they had faced before. The ship landed in a hidden dock on the outskirts of the city, and they moved quickly, splitting into small teams. Lucas was with Iria, their group tasked with taking out the communications center. As they moved through the dark streets, Lucas could feel the tension building. The air was thick with the weight of what they were about to do. When they reached the building, they didn't waste any time. They had prepared for this moment for weeks, and now was the time to act. Iria signaled to the team, and they moved in, using the element of surprise to their advantage. The guards didn't stand a chance. Within minutes, they had disabled the security systems and were inside, planting explosives at key points in the communications center. Iria was calm, her movements precise as she set the charges. Lucas worked beside her, feeling the rush of adrenaline course through him. They were doing it, they were making history, but just as they finished planting the last of the explosives, the alarms went off. The Empire had figured out what was happening. "They know we're here," Iria said, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to get out now." Lucas's heart raced as they sprinted through the corridors, the sound of sirens echoing in their ears. They were close, so close. But as they rounded the corner to the exit, they were met with a squad of elite Imperial soldiers. Without thinking, Lucas drew his weapon and fired. The sound of gunfire filled the air as the rebels fought back, trying to hold off the soldiers long enough to escape. Iria was in the thick of it, her sword flashing as she cut down anyone who came too close. "Keep moving," Lucas shouted, grabbing Iria's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They had to get out, had to get to the ship before the Empire could catch them. They made it out of the building just as the explosion tore through the communications center. The shockwave rocked the streets, sending debris flying. The Empire's communications were down. They had done it, but the fight was far from over. As they reached the ship, Lucas could see the flames rising in the distance, the capital city beginning to burn. It was a symbol of their victory, but it was also a sign of the chaos they had just unleashed. The Empire would retaliate. They would come for them with everything they had. But as Lucas looked over at Iria, he saw something in her eyes, a look of quiet satisfaction. They had struck at the heart of the Empire, and now there was no going back. "We did it," Lucas said, his voice breathless. Iria nodded, her expression determined. "This is just the beginning." As the ship lifted off into the sky, Lucas knew she was right. The battle had only just begun, but together they had shown the galaxy that the Empire was not invincible. And no matter how many battles they had to fight, no matter how long it took, they were going to win this war. They had no choice.